Greetings everyone. This is a presentation and a YouTube video made mostly for the Department of Justice, the insane visa process and a case for the prosecution of an arrogant, incompetent, and corrupt U.S. federal government. So this is a new topic slide, which means you're going to see a new topic. So this is the government's task in fiancé visa cases. The primary task is, pretty basic, same as all visa cases. Determine who is legitimate and following the law, law-abiding citizens, and going through a legal system. Approve all those cases and deny cases where the applicant is being fraudulent, trying to get into the United States through visa fraud. Basically, approve all the good people, deny the bad people. The good people in fiancé visa cases are couples, US citizens and their citizen petitioners and their fiancés, foreign fiancés, couples who are in loving relationships. And the fiancé visa system was designed for them. But we have, groups of bad people, terrorists who want to get into the country and kill Americans, sham marriages, foreign citizens who pay for citizenship and get fixed up with a U.S. citizen through a marriage, victims of human trafficking who are people that are brought into the United States and put in a situation that they don't want to be in. They're tricked by Americans. And fraudulent foreign fiancés who are fiancés who just want to get into the United States to get a green card, and then they leave. They leave their U.S. citizen. So there's 4 possible outcomes of every fiancé visa case. There's couples who are legitimate, loving relationships who get approved. That's a good thing. There's couples who are criminal, fraudulent, and posing as a real bona fide couple, and they get denied. That would be a good thing if it ever happened. Couples who are criminal, fraudulent, and presenting themselves as a bona fide couple, and they get approved. That's a bad thing, but that happens all the time. And number 4, couples who are in legitimate, loving relationships who get denied, which is also a bad thing. So that's the end of that topic, the government task. Pretty simple task. The government's methodologies in fiancé visa cases. So this is the INA, and in the INA, the INA, by the way, is the Immigration and Nationality Act. This is Section 104A. The Secretary of State shall be charged with the administration and the enforcement of the provisions of this Act and all other immigration and nationality laws relating to the powers, duties, functions, of diplomatic and consular officers of the United States. So in other words, the Department of State, the Secretary of State, who delegated this to the Deputy Secretary of State, has the authority to implement criteria for how the cases are handled. So what the government uses is something they call the whole of government approach. That's, supposed to make it sound, it's actually spreading the responsibility because nothing works. So it starts with an analysis of the I-129F, which is the form that couples file for a fiancé visa. And then it goes, the couple, the American citizen petitioner goes through a background check to make sure that they're, not a criminal trying to do some criminal activity. Then we have 2 other things that are in this a government approach, the whole of government approach. The indicator system, which is a statistical analysis of information contained on or derived from the I-129F. So we don't care what the government calls this. They can call it an indicator system. We call it a statistical analysis. The final stage of the interview at the consulate, and that's, mandated by law to the INA. This is a psychological analysis of the fiancé visa case and the fiancé. So the whole of government approach is just, they call it a whole of government approach. We call it a statistical analysis and a psychological analysis. So here, also in the INA, Section 104A, it says that the Secretary of State shall be charged with, setting up the criteria, except for those powers, duties, and functions conferred upon the consular officers relating to the granting or refusal of visas. So what that means is if the consular officer has the final say in all fiancé visa cases. So let's take a look at consular officers. So whether you're an immigration officer, they usually call these immigration officers in the USCIS, or a consular officer, which is an immigration officer in the consulate, they both enter the government as a job grade GS5 or GS7 and earn promotions to a maximum of GS9. So if you look at the federal grade scales here, GS3 and 4 are typically, they're part-time interns. They're your college students that go to work for their Senate offices in the summertime. They get an internship. GS5 to 7 is entry level. So these people enter the government in a entry level position, and they go up to a job grade 9, which you would see is just barely into the next level of mid-level position. So we're talking maybe a senior clerical person in a corporation, or a mailroom supervisor or something like that. So that's the end of that. The methodologies, basically a statistical analysis and a psychological analysis. New topic, the whole of government approach and the indicator system. So we're going to take a little closer look at the indicator system. So the whole of government approach uses the whole of government indicator system, which is a statistical analysis of the information contained on or derived from the I-129F visa application form. So, they make it sound like, there's some kind of magic here, but, someone's just typing in this form into a database, and that's all it amounts to. And then there's other stuff that goes into the database, like the database would be hit up against, criminal areas. If a US Citizen Petitioner lives in an area of town that's, notorious for prostitution or drug rings or something like that, that might be an indicator. So there's other background stuff in addition to other supporting information, in addition to what you as a US Citizen Petitioner fills in on the I-129F. So this is, if you're a U.S. Citizen Petitioner, you've probably gone up to the internet and looked for I-129F red flags. So red flags are, if we tell U.S. Citizen Petitioners to go through the first 20 hits on this and make a comprehensive list of everything that all these sites say is a red flag. And once you get the comprehensive list together, you've got about everything. So this is the I-129F. This is page 1, and you can see there's some information on here that you fill in, including your address could indicate a high crime area, your country of birth. Maybe your country of birth is Iran, and you're over here and you're looking for a fiance from Pakistan. That might be an indicator, you would think, but not necessarily. So there's some indicators here that are when a U.S. Citizen Petitioner types this stuff in, or enters it on the form, and the government types it in, some clerical worker at the USCIS, then they see, they are alerted to certain things. Like number 6 here is the date of birth. Now, date of birth is not an indicator, but the date of birth with the date of birth of the fiance, you can derive the difference in age, which is an indicator. So we're going to take a look at this difference in age because it's a simple mathematical thing to look at. If you are, say, someone who's designing the system for the USCIS, some kind of developer, and you're sitting in a meeting, with a bunch of other people, and you're trying to decide, okay, age is an indicator, but what do we do with it? If we set the indicator at 3 years, then you're marking the vast majority of the population, so you don't want to do that. You don't want to mark everybody, and then you have that many people to look at. If you set it at 10 years, maybe you're getting to where, you're marking half the population. That's still too much. But if you set it at 15 years, you're looking at the extremes of the population here that you're going to mark with your indicators. So what this graph is, this is a normal distribution curve, and this is the field of statistics, whether the government wants to realize it or not. This is the field of statistics, and indicators are part of the field of statistics. That's a scientific study field. So here we take a look at the these are terrorists. These are San Bernardino terrorists, and this is a significant event in U.S. history because these terrorists, they were the first terrorists to successfully come into the country on a Fiancé visa and kill Americans. And a Fiancé visa happens to be one of the fastest, easiest ways to get into the country. So this was very alarming to a lot of people. But let's take a look at how a terrorist looks at this. So this guy, he decides he's going to go all jihad on us, and he doesn't want to go to Syria or someplace and fight Americans with guns. He wants to kill innocent ladies and children and stuff like that because he's a coward, because he's a terrorist. So this guy goes up to some site, and it's a www.findajihadwifethatcanhandleautomaticweapon.com. And he starts looking around at all the fiancés there, and he sees this woman here, and he picks her out. And he's, you can tell here I blew up the ages of these people. So we have the US Citizen Petitioner was born in 6/14/1997, and the fiancé was born 7/13/1986. So they're born 336 days apart. So is that an accident? No. Because when he went up to www.findagagun-toting-jihad-wife.com, he was looking for somebody who would not give him any indicators because he's about to do a criminal act and he doesn't want to get caught. He wants to kill Americans first and then get caught or killed or whatever. So this is how easy it is to beat the system. You just look for people, similar age, language, background, nationality, everything's the same. There's no chance that the government's going to catch you. So here's a better look. I went up to the USCIS and put in their case number, and just to look at the background on a case. And these people just flew through the system. They didn't have any indicators. The incompetent U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the equally incompetent U.S. Department of State uses an indicator system that cannot possibly identify terrorists or any other target group. We already mentioned the target groups. We'll be taking a better look at all of them. Because all the target groups, including terrorists, avoid indicators and they lie on forms. That's how easy it is. And there's no indicators to a threat to national security. So that's a quote. We'll take a look at that quote later. You'll see who it came from. So keep in mind that what they're doing here is they're marking, with their indicator system, they're marking a small percentage of the population, which is suspect, and they use that small percentage of the population that has high indicators when they go to the interview process. The problem is, all of the target groups, terrorists, human traffickers, sham marriages, all fiancé visa criminals know what indicators are. Why? Because they look it up on the internet. Or they take a look at the I-129F form and they just figure every field's an indicator. Let's look for somebody who doesn't give us any. So in other words, the government system is looking for this population in red in the middle here on the graph on the right. But that population in the middle of the criminals, the people that you want to catch, are avoiding indicators. So the brilliant government is using an I-129F form and their whole of government system, which includes the indicators on the form, while the target populations are avoiding any indicators. So, a 12-year-old could do this. If this seems stupid, that's because it's stupid. So a high number of indicators like differences in age, language, education, ethnicity, income, social status, etc. High number of indicators means that you're going to go into the fiancé visa interview with flags all over the place, and the consulate officers, who are entry-level people, are just guided to say, hey, look, high indicators, low indicators you fly through, high indicators you don't fly through. And it depends. They have a denial quota. They don't ever publish this. They tell you there's no quota, but they deny 2% of all fiancé visa cases every year. Just a coincidence, I guess. So legitimate couples have indicators because why? Because, when you go overseas and you meet your fiance, whether you're in school or on a work assignment or in the military or whatever, you meet a foreign person, you start dating them, and then you go through the, process of getting to know each other. You fall in love, you make a commitment to each other just like anyone else, only it happens to be you're overseas and your fiance is foreign. You don't worry about indicators. You find out that you have them later. But terrorists, they avoid them. So this is the net result of that. Anybody that goes through the indicator system and has a low population, a low number of indicators, we'll find this out later, but I don't think there's ever been anybody that went through the system with no or little indicators who has ever been stopped from coming into the United States. We're going to get some of this information through the Freedom of Information Act. And people with high indicators, they're up for grabs. It's just a matter of what kind of mood the the entry-level consulate officer is in. If he just denied the first 3 people that came in today and he sees you and your fiance, he sees your fiance, maybe he'll approve because he's already got a few denials. But if he hasn't had any denials, then your fiance gets denied. So we, being some smart people, I'm a federal government consultant and I know how to rip apart the government. So I went out and found some mathematical statisticians, all PhDs in prestigious universities. You'll see that later. And, I found people that just rip this process to shreds because the indicator system and the process used with it have no basis in the field of statistics, no basis in science. It's just government decided, hey, let's do this. This doesn't have any basis in science, but let's use it anyway. So this is just a page to show you there are over 200 counterterrorism organizations in the United States. But for some reason, the brain-dead idiots at the US Department of Homeland Security / USCIS and the Department of State, they're hell-bent on identifying terrorists. They have no facility to do this, but they insist on doing it in the fiancé visa process, which is kind of crazy. There's people that can do this. They're not looking at the fiancé visa cases. So that's the end of that topic, the indicator system. Now we go to the fiancé visa interview, which is the psychological part. So there's 2 steps. You file the I-129F form. It goes through a process with the USCIS, and once it gets approved, it goes to the U.S. consulate abroad, and then you're interviewed by an entry-level consulate officer. So back to this, remember the Deputy Secretary of State establishes policies and procedures that the U.S. consulates have to follow, which includes the insane and ineffective whole-of-government indicator system. So these indicators follow your fiancé, right to the interview, and your consulate officer is looking at your indicators. So what effect does the indicators have on the interview? Well, it has this kind of effect. We'll see this in a couple of minutes, but basically the consular officers do what they're told. They do what they're trained to do. So US Citizen Petitioners and their foreign fiancés study past interviews on visa forums and on YouTube and social media. If you're a US Citizen Petitioner and you have a fiancé, you want to get married, you might want to do a little bit of research on the internet because that's what everybody does. So there are places on the internet like visa forums, like YouTube, and like Facebook, Twitter, other social media, where you can go up there and do some research and find out, who's gone through the process already and learn some things. So this is my initial audit of visa denials, and this is a little bit crazy. So I'm going to read just a couple lines here. I don't know how many I put in this presentation. If you want to see a lot of these, go to our bigger presentation. We have, for couples, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you see the numbered videos, they're each about 20 or 30 minutes apiece, and they're in great detail. I'm just going to give you a couple examples here. So this is an interview. This is an audit. My initial audit of visa denials, and I got this stuff. You can look at these quotes because I didn't manipulate anything. I just got every quote that I could find and I pasted them in here. But only this is a small sample of what I found. If you want to see everything I found, look at the bigger presentation. We have a 600-page presentation that gives everything that I researched. So this is an example. My fiance's K-1 visa was denied. The CO gave his reason: the relationship is not bona fide. We've been in a relationship for 5 years. Now, if you're in a relationship for 5 years, how can you not have evidence that you're in a legitimate relationship? You've got maybe pictures of 5 Christmases together, stuff. You've got the proof. How could they possibly, how can anybody, even an entry-level moron, how could they deny a visa for somebody who's been in a relationship for 5 years? That's just craziness. So here, the CO didn't look at our evidence, not surprised by this, because why aren't they surprised? Because this US Citizen Petitioner, or the fiance, whoever wrote this quote, went up and found that, COs never look through the evidence. Why? They don't need the evidence. Why? Because they go by the indicators. If you have no indicators, you're through. If you have a bunch of indicators, it's whatever the gods, whether they're in your favor or not. So here's another one. He was convinced there was no picture of his mom and I. So this is your fiance speaking. So it says his mom. So in this case, the U.S. Citizen Petitioner is a man and the fiance is a woman, which is most of the cases in fiance visas. There's no picture of his mom and I, so the CO denied our case. Okay. In the second one, unable to show sufficient evidence, proved the credible relationship. This is basically a standard that they give. This is this and the first one here, which is denied doing to her being found ineligible under 221G. So 221G is like a soft denial. That means there's something missing here. Maybe they want to see, somehow it got through the USCIS and got approved, and then went to the consulate, and the consular officer wants to see something else. So that's a soft denial. They deny you, and then they're waiting for you to send some stuff in. And here's, denied because he told her, okay, this is a CR1 visa that was denied. And this came as a surprise to the couple, because they had a denied K-1 visa, which means fiance. So they went and got married, and they were denied. The consular officer said, "You're denied. We don't believe you're real. Get married first." So they get married, and then they denied him anyway. This is, you see craziness in this. People should study this. This is just totally crazy. I am very upset now. She's pregnant. Well, that's a good reason to deny. The CO feels that we are married already. Well, when you file your fiance visa case, you give the USCIS your divorce papers. You're certified at your county divorce papers. So you're divorced. So CO feels that we're married. That's not a reason. That's somebody, this guy ought to be taken out and shot. So anyways, this is just a farce. This is just the more you read through these, the more insane it'll sound. Evidence not accepted or looked at. We're planning on getting him married in America with a huge reception and everything. So pause these screens and read them if you'd like, and look at some of our longer videos, and you'll see that this is just a joke. So most denials are at the interview are due to the failure to prove the existence of a bona fide relationship. So this is just basically a catch-all. It's basically you're denied because they haven't denied anybody lately, and they have to deny some people, and you'll see that later why. They have a good reason why they have to deny some people. I'm not arguing with that, but the whole system's just crazy, and I'm not arguing with that either. So the U.S. Department of State officer, encouraged by an insane system, has the ability to label you. Oh, by the way, once you and your fiance are denied, you get put into a U.S. Department of State criminal database as attempting visa fraud. So they determine you don't have a bona fide relationship. You're now put in a database, and you're marked as a criminal, despite the fact that you might be crime-free. Maybe the only thing you ever have in your life is a traffic ticket for jaywalking. That doesn't matter to these guys because why? Because the system's insane. So, this is just an example. This is the show 90 Day Fiancé, which is uber popular on TLC. So most denials at the interview are failure to prove the existence of a bona fide relationship. But then we have these people that, if they're on fiance visa, 90-day fiance, I mean, they went through the fiance visa process and they got into the country. So how did this, Mohammed guy get into the country? You know, did he have a legitimate relationship? No, because he booked as soon as he came over here. And you can just look at these people. Some of these fiance visa people or 90-day fiance people are just they're put on the show because they're a big mismatch, and they're put on the show for drama. But still, the people that are, I read one article that says that 90-day fiance is like 90% fiance visa fraud, but they get through the system because why? Because they don't have any indicators. These are approvals. They're just as crazy. Do you know what a K-1 visa means? What does your fiance do? Have you been to the United States to visit him? Are you okay with getting married in the United States instead of your native country? It says, okay, you're approved. So 4 questions there. 3 questions here in the middle. How long have we been engaged? When do I plan on leaving for the U.S.? And how did we meet? Okay, 3 questions and you're approved. So this goes on and on and on. This, there's no difference between approvals and denials. They're all a farce. They go through this, the motions of having an interview because, it's mandated by law. It's the INA says that the consular officer has the final say in the approval or denial of a case. So, but the problem is, the case is predetermined before you even get to the interview or before your fiance gets to the interview. So these forums, along with social media accounts, are just some of the places where the work of the U.S. consulates are evaluated and graded. They say, hey, this is what happened in our interview. And even people that get approved, say that it's a farce. And we have some professionals in the psychology, in psychology. And our people just ripped this apart. I mean, our best psychology guy, went overboard and researched on his own and watched the C-SPAN video that I'll show you a little later. He watched that a few times. I've watched it several times. And, psychologists will not like this at all. There's no basis in psychology for this stuff. So, we have 2 processes so far, the USCIS and their indicator system, which has no basis in statistics, means it has no basis in science. And this has no basis in the field of psychology, which is also a science. So there's no basis in science for either one of these things. So this is back to the San Bernardino terrorists again. So their case was approved, with no or very little indicators. I looked through their I-129F. I didn't see anything that would serve as an indicator. They basically had none, so they're approved automatically. And then, you bring a terrorist, you bring this woman into a U.S. consulate. Is an entry-level consular officer going to be able to tell that she's actually a terrorist and she's wanting to get into the country just to kill people? No, because why? Because the consular officer is an entry-level person with no psychology skills at all. There's no chance at all of a entry-level consular officer, to catch any, a terrorist or any of the target groups. 0 chance that would ever happen, unless it was a guess. So, the general consensus up here, my visa was denied and I was placed on administrative processing 221G. So that's a real common thing here. And, people say this is the general consensus of the internet, that the consulate, the interviews, you already knows whether they're going to approve the case or deny it. There's no basis in science in asking 3 questions and saying you're approved or you're denied based on, my expert analysis of your answers to these questions. That's crazy. There's no expert analysis. There's only an entry-level consular officer, and the government just, treats them like puppets. They manipulate them. That's how it goes. So, whether the case was denied or approved, nobody ever looks at the volumes of proof of an ongoing relationship, which is crazy because, when you apply for an I-129F for a fiancé visa, I've looked at the timelines up here on the government site and some of these forum sites, and you're looking at, 5 months before you even get your case looked at by the USCIS. And what can happen in 5 months? That's why everybody takes in proof of an ongoing relationship to the interview. But nobody ever looks at that. this has no basis in science either. It has no basis in sanity, because the couple, when they sent in the I-129F several months ago, it's going to be like 6 or 7 months before your interview. You would think that, you would look at the proof of an ongoing relationship. Have you guys been talking every day? Are you on each other's social media sites? Stuff like that would indicate that you have a valid relationship. They don't care about that. All they care about, they have to deny some people, and we'll see why later. So that's the end of that topic. So that's the fiancé visa interview, the psychological part. And again, we have experts in the field of psychology, and we have experts in the field of statistics who ripped apart both of these. And why did they rip them apart? Because I ripped them apart initially, and I needed to do some clout building. I'm just a federal government consultant, so I needed to go out and, I don't mess around finding experts. I found the best experts that I could find in the world, in the United States. We'll see how later. So this is a new topic here. This is the meeting. This is a U.S. Senate Committee on Immigration. The upper pictures and the lower left one are all senators, U.S. senators, and the bottom right is the leadership team of the Department of Homeland Security / USCIS, and also ICE. The guy on the right is ICE, and the Department of State, U.S. consulates. And this is a meeting that the Senate basically, the Senate Committee on Immigration summoned in this leadership team to address fiancé visa fraud. And this is a C-SPAN video. Everybody should watch the C-SPAN video. Just look for, go up to YouTube and look for Senate Committee on Immigration, fiancé visa fraud, and C-SPAN video. That ought to be enough. You will find the video if you just use, Senate Committee on Immigration, C-SPAN, and fiancé visa fraud. This is a 1 hour and 50-minute meeting. So this is just the leadership team here. This is Chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Immigration, Grassley. And the players here are Don Neufeld, David Donahue, David Renaud, Matthew Emmerich, and Greg Navarro. So each one of these guys introduces, if you watch the C-SPAN video, they'll do, I think they have 5 minutes to give an introduction. And this time they're supposed to tell all about, their area. So this is Neufeld here, and he's with the Service Center operation. So if you're a US Citizen Petitioner and you send in your fiancé visa case, your I-129F, your packet, it goes to one of several fiancé visa processing centers in the United States, and this guy's ahead of them. So this guy talks a little bit about his service centers. They're staffed by 3,681 employees and 1,800 contractors. And I found that a little bit alarming because, I'm a federal government contractor, and you just don't see too many times where you have 1,800 contractors for 3,600 people. So you have one contractor for every 2 people. And I can't imagine being a federal government contractor on this project or in this area and not being a whistleblower and raising all kinds of hell because there's stupid stuff going on here and it's illegal and it's insane and there's no basis for it in science. I would certainly be raising hell. I'm raising hell now. So what this Senate committee wanted was an update on what's going on. What's going on with fiancé visa fraud, meaning terrorists and sham marriages and human trafficking and stuff like that. So they summoned these guys in here for a progress report because this was the second meeting on this topic. So what they saw, instead of getting real explanations, was a smoke and mirrors act. Okay, because I saw it, like I said, I watched this video several times all the way through, maybe 5 times all the way through, and then, additional maybe 5 times, 20 minutes at a time to gather information and do research. So why didn't they realize that they were seeing a smoke and mirrors act? Because they're senators, and senators just, that's, their primary goal in life is to self-promotion. They don't have any interest in this. They're calling in this committee to look good. And number two reason is, no senator sat through the entire meeting. If you watch this meeting, it's an hour and 50 minutes long. See these, I think the two best guys, well, the best one at the beginning is Senator Feinstein from California, because, she was addressing the San Bernardino attack, which is in her state of California, and also the sham marriages, which the latest one at the time, there's sham marriages all the time, but this was a LA firm, which is California, which is her state. So she was the initial person that gave all the, that addressed this committee, and then Senator Cruz and Tillis came in at the end. They came in like an hour and 30 minutes late. So I saw the whole meeting, and I know who was there, and no senator was there for the whole meeting. So I don't know why. This is like having a court case and having the jury, come in when they want, and then go take a couple hour smoke break or whatever, and coming back in. It's it's important for these people to see this meeting, to see this, this. When you summon in somebody to give a testimony, you should watch it. Just plain crazy if you don't. So examples of the Smoke and Mirror Act. Feinstein here asks about the San Bernardino attack, which is the first terrorist attack where terrorists, came to the United States on a fiancé visa. So Emmerich here fields this question. She says, what's going on? What's the latest on this? He replies that the San Bernardino reviews have been done. Additional measures in the screening process have bbeen identified. Also, forms were modified and interviewers were trained on the charges. So you can see here, I don't know if you can see it, but I can barely see it. But he gives us at the 1:13:16 mark. So an hour and 13 minutes into the meeting is when Feinstein asked this question. So, like I said, Feinstein came in late and left early, but she did address a few issues because they happened in her state. So the second one was Feinstein said, hey, we got 274 cases identified by ICE, 270, where victims, they got into the USA through work and fiancé visas, and an additional 500 entered because they're families of these fiancés. But these are all victims of human trafficking. So she asked about this. How does this happen? How do human trafficking people get into the country? And Emmerich replies, there were no human trafficking indicators. Well, I don't know. A senator just says, okay, no indicators. That's fine. I wouldn't say that because why? Because, I'm smart. I wouldn't take that as an answer. That's not an answer. What do you mean there's no human trafficking indicators? What has this done? Has human trafficking gone down any? No, probably not. So just to show you what human trafficking indicators are, this is Grace Huang, who was on panel number 1. The leadership team of the US CIS and the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State consulates, the leadership team was panel 2. Panel 1 was a few people, and Grace Huang was one of them. And Grace is with the Asia Pacific Institute, and she is she's an advocate for human trafficking victims. She's got her own website and everything. So human trafficking, I put a little thing up here because I saw this ad up on the internet. Human trafficking is a global problem. It happens in the United States. People might not realize this, but it happens all over the world, and it happens in the United States too. People come into the country, they get scammed to come into the country sometimes, and sometimes they know what they're getting into, but they wind up in prostitution or some kind of servitude or forced labor. And, they're basically in a position they didn't want to be in. So Feinstein inquires about marriage fraud, and that's where sham marriages come in. And we'll get to that later in a little bit more detail. But Navarro answers here. He's the ICE guy. The ICE guy, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. Navarro replies that marriage fraud is taken seriously, also stated previously. So I have 2 marks here where he's talking at the 119 mark and at the 4357 mark. The fiancé visa applicants are given the most scrutiny of any visas. Why? Because it's the easiest way to get into country. So they have to scrutinize these very, very closely. But the problem is they're using a system that doesn't work. So that's the end of that meeting. So again, you should go up there and watch us, especially, Department of Justice. Don't take my word that the government's insane and needs to be arrested and prosecuted. Watch the video. Now we're going to take a look at the arrogance, incompetence, and corruption of the US Department of Homeland Security and Department of State. First, arrogance. I'm going to go through this pretty fast. A fiancé going into an interview is going to wind up after the interview getting one of these forms. There's a white form and a blue form and a green form, and basically, the color of the form is whether you passed or not, and if you didn't pass, what they need. This is what you usually get. Then, a lot of times, cases. This was a case. This is a case from Guangzhou, from China. And this is a case where it was first put into administrative processing because there was something missing, and then the US Citizen Petitioner or the Fiancé or somebody inquired. I guess the Citizen Petitioner inquired through a senator's office, and oh no, this is the first letter. So this is what they got, to say that their case is denied. I'm sorry, this was after a congressional inquiry. A senator, the case was in administrative processing for a while, 5 or 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever. And somebody called their senator. The senator wrote into the consulate and said, hey, what's going on? And then on the same exact day, this case was denied. It's like, don't bother us. We're going to deny your case because you bothered us. So we found that you're not eligible for the visa category in which you are applying. This is a generic letter that goes out to, in this case, it goes to a K visa applicant, but that could have been any visa applicant because this is a generic letter. The Consulate General no longer has jurisdiction over this case. If you or your petitioner contacts the consulate, no specific information will be provided, nor will additional documents be accepted. So in other words, you're denied. You don't need to know why you're denied. Why? Because we're demigods. We're the government, and we don't have to do that because the INA doesn't say anything about, if you deny a visa applicant, you have to tell them why. So, it takes massive corruption to establish business policies and procedures or government policies and procedures that just, say you don't need to give a reason because it doesn't say it in the INA. There's no law that says we have to tell you why you're denied. You're just denied. So that's arrogance. So I've read through hundreds of these things. If you just take a look at the letter in the back, you're not eligible for the visa category in which you applied. That's just a generic thing that's used at every consular office in the world, every U.S. consular office. So this, arrogance is not an accident. It's a tool here because the U.S. consulate, if they told you why you were denied, they might have to, you would have an opportunity to question it. But if they don't tell you, you don't have squat. You can't do anything. So now we're looking at incompetence. So these are the 4 outcomes of a visa case. We already looked at these. You have legitimate couples approved. You have criminal people that are denied. Those are both good things. And then we have criminals that are approved, and we have legit people who are denied. Those are bad things. So number 1, about 30,000 fiancé visa cases are approved annually because, most people don't have too many indicators and they just fly through the system. Terrorists too. And number 2, has this ever happened? Have we ever had criminals that were actually caught at the, by the USCIS or the interview? Doubt it. I'd like to see the stats on that. The people that turn out to be fraudulent and, got through the country some other way, and then they linked them up to a fiancé visa case in the past and found out that they were denied the first time they tried to get into the country. Number 3, criminals and fraudulent relationships who are approved. That happens all the time with every terrorist and every sham marriage and every human trafficking person that tries to get into this country because a 12-year-old could beat the system. And couples who are in a legitimate relationship who are denied. Now that's bad, but the thing is, it's 4 is necessary almost, because if you have a system that cannot find the target groups, you still can't approve every visa case, because if you approved every visa case, every single one, you'd have terrorists lined up to come into this country by the zillions, and human traffickers and sham marriages and stuff like that. So you have to deny some to make it look like you're working. And if you can't deny the right populations because you can't find them because you're using a system that's flipping insane and has no basis in science, then you deny people with indicators, and those are legitimate couples. So that's a necessity because of government incompetence. If the government knew what they were doing, that wouldn't be a necessity. But right now, number 4 is a necessity. So incompetence, incompetence, incompetence. So we're looking at the San Bernardino attack again. So this, this act of incompetence by the government, they couldn't tell that this person, the woman went through an interview and, she never met the guy. She lied about what country she's from. She came in through like some country in the Arab Peninsula, like United Emirates or Saudi Arabia or something like that. I don't know where she came in, but she's actually from Pakistan, which, that's where we got Osama bin Laden. Pakistan is a country that harbors terrorists, and she just lied on her form and got into the country. And incompetence caused the death of these 14 Americans. So these people are no longer with us because of government incompetence. And this is going to happen again. Sad as it is, there's nothing that the government can do to stop this from happening again. Sham marriages. This is a crazy scheme. This is the one that happened in Los Angeles that Feinstein was concerned about. So this is a father-daughter team that came into the United States on this is a father-daughter team that set up a fake marriage agency. They neither one of them are lawyers. They don't have any degrees in law or anything. Neither one of them are registered as an immigration law firm. They just set up a, downtown LA. You can see the address here is like 60 South something, or, that means you're right downtown. So they got in this, nice building with all law firms in it, and they rented out this big office, and they set up and looked like they were a legitimate law firm, but they're just criminals. They say, hey, let's make, $40, $50, $60,000 a pop, $80,000. Whatever we can get out of a Chinese citizen that wants to come over here and marry a Chinese American who happens to be an American citizen, and let's fix them up. They want to get in a country, they're willing to pay. We can match them up with somebody who's looking for a spouse. So that was pretty easy for them to do. None of them ever got caught. They brought them all into the country and they got married, and somehow ICE found out afterwards through some, investigation. And then they went to this firm and did an audit and found out that, 70 of these people, got through the system. So 70 times, several, like tens or thousands of dollars is a lot of money. These people were making money out the butt. So this is incompetence. The system is set up to where you're looking for indicators, and these lawyers, even fake lawyers, any 12-year-old could beat the system. So a fake lawyer can beat it. When they're going to hook up an American Citizen Petitioner with a foreign fiance, they're going to look for people that, they're not going to look for people that have a difference in language. Like somebody from Guangzhou who speaks Cantonese with somebody from Shanghai, which is either Mandarin or Shanghainese. They're going to make sure your languages are the same, your age is the same, your social status is the same, your education's the same. You're going to have no indicators, and you're going to just fly through the system. And then when it comes to the interview time, we're talking about an entry-level consulate officer who's trained. If there are no indicators, you just pass them. That's what you do. This is human trafficking victims. So this was fiscal year 2015. I didn't see one for later than that. But this is a year where 1,437 arrests for human trafficking and 400 human trafficking victims. Now, how did they get into the country? Well, they're smarter than 12-year-old. They slid right through. Incompetence. This is a closer look at the statistics of we already went over this, but these are the indicators for. I used age again here. It's hard to graph religions, so age is a pretty easy one to use as an example. But if you take a look at this, the target populations of terrorists, which is what we're most concerned about, sham marriages, victims of human trafficking, they all avoid indicators, and your system is you're indicating the wrong population. You're only marking people who are in legitimate relationships. That's just crazy. It seems crazy. That's because it's crazy. So who are they marking, if they're not marking the target group? So they're marking, the fiancés of legitimate, US citizen petitioners who are in loving relationships. So that's incompetence. Corruption. So number 3 and number 4 here, this is back to the 4 outcomes of any fiancé visa case. These are atrocities against U.S. citizens. You shouldn't have criminal people getting approved, and you shouldn't have legitimate people being denied. But like I said, number 4 is almost necessary because they can't find a target population. So they know they have to deny legitimate people. They know they're legitimate, but they deny them anyway. Why? Because they can't approve everyone. If they approved everyone, we'd have a bigger problem in this country. So, the government, always looks at it number 4. Well, you failed to prove that you have a legitimate relationship. So that's their catch-all for denying you. They don't give you anything else, any other details. Some people were told, there's no picture of, your fiance with your mother. But for the most part, they don't tell you anything. They just deny your case. Okay, here's another act of corruption. So basically the government in the fiancé visa process uses corruption whenever they can possibly get away with it. And they have a reason, and the reason is number 4. Number 4, they can't identify the correct people. They have to deny some real people. They don't want you to be able to do anything about it because that puts them in a real bind. They'd have to approve everybody. So they've implemented a policy of holding on to a denied visa case until the I-797 validity period expires. So the validity period on a I-797 is assigned for an intentionally short period of time, which is 4 months. So once this case is, approved, once your visa case is approved by the USCIS, they forward the case and they send you this form, I-797, and the form has a validity period on it. And then they send that to the visa processing center, who then assigns a case for the consulate. And then it's sent to the consulate, with a visa, with a printed visa, just in case the consulate office approves your case. So if your case is not approved at the consulate and it's denied, by law, they're supposed to send it back to the USCIS for revocation. But that never happens. And the reason that never happens is because of corruption. It doesn't say in the INA, the Immigration and Nationality Act, that you can't do this. And Donahue's as corrupt as they come. So what he does is he implemented a policy that says, okay, if you deny a case, instead of sending it back to the USCIS to give the couple a chance, we already picked them as the 2% quota. Don't give them a chance. Let's just hold on to the packet until it's too late. Make sure you hold on to the packet until it's expired. Then when it goes back to the USCIS, the couple has no chance. That's pure corruption. A guy ought to be shot for doing this, but we can't shoot people. So it takes just 4 to 5 days for an approved I-129F packet to get from the National Visa Center to the U.S. Consulate. It ought to take the same amount of time to get back. That has never happened in the history of any fiancé visa case that we saw, and we've audited hundreds of them. This is another act of corruption. They don't even follow the INA. On the left you see the INA, and this is section 221G on the bottom. You're supposed to have a period of time, you have actually 1 year to provide whatever they want due to a 221G, which is a soft denial. But you can see on the right, they don't do that. They just say, your case is not bona fide. Whatever we're missing, the hell with you. We're just going to deny your case, section 221G, but we're going to send the stuff back, to the USCIS, and then they don't do it. That's just pure corruption. And this is what they should be doing. If they suspect terrorism, and to suspect terrorism, in the world today, you have to do a little bit of, national profiling and religious profiling, because it just so happens that terrorists are all Islam, So, if you get that kind of an indicator, you should be, using some other assets that you have in the government. And what you have is people that can look at the dark web, because, I mentioned before that this terrorist went up to www to find a, terrorist jihadi wife.com. That's not really the case. What they do is they go into the dark web and, they look for, jihad, organizations there. The U.S. government, knows that these things exist. Terrorists, American, jihadists or jihadists from anywhere can go to these sites and find them. That means the CIA can find them. That means the FBI can find them. That means the hundreds of joint terrorism task forces can find them. So if they were smart, they would look for an indicator that might be a terrorist, like coming from a terrorist harboring country or being Islam, and just checking everybody Islam. And just, making sure that they're not, that these people are not, hitting these websites. You have their email address. You can find their IP address. You can find out whether they actually access some jihadi site. But we don't bother doing that because why? Because, that'd be too much trouble. So this is a little bit about if you want to go up here, if you're Department of Justice person, if you want to look through this whole video, which I suggest you do, you don't have to take notes when you're looking at this video. You just jot down, Ted Cruz said this, sensitive, okay? So all you have to do is jot down Ted Cruz sensitive, and you could find that later in the video by doing underneath the video. There's a little search here. There's actually text. This text goes along with the video, and this is a system that records, does voice recognition. It just records this stuff. So you see the word sensitive there. If you click on that, it actually advances to the part of the video where Ted Cruz said that. So this is pretty cool. So if you're going through and watching this video, you don't have to take really good notes. You just have to remember who said what, and you can find it later. Of course, I didn't find that out right away. So Senator Cruz here pointed out to the leadership committee, or I'm sorry, the leadership team, that the San Bernardino terrorist entered the country on a K-1 visa. She lied about her Pakistani address, and they both lied about having met in person. And he said, what went wrong? What have we done to fix it? And again, everybody should watch this entire video, especially the Department of Justice. Emmerich replied that there were no national security indicators on the I-129F. What a shock. The terrorists didn't, they lied. They lied about a Pakistani address. They lied, wherever it was convenient. So the incident was reviewed by the US CIS. They added more information to the form. They added the field, are you a terrorist? And conducted more training to determine credibility. We do not have robust infrastructures overseas to verify addresses. So in other words, whatever address you put on there, we can't check your overseas address. We don't have any way of doing that. We'll look it up on Google. If we can't find it, we can't find it. So Cruz asked, if the same person used the same address again, would we be able to catch him? Emmerich stumbles around on this and says, depends on whether or not there was a national security indicator in the address. In other words, he didn't tell the truth here. He's just fumbling around saying there's no national security indicator on the address. So he lied. The truth is that any 12-year-old could beat the system. Any terrorist could enter the country on a fiancé visa, and they can't do anything about it because the system just isn't set up by any sane people. Donahue was asked about social media, and he replies that it's a tough nut to crack. Well, well, crack it. That's your job, Common social media could never identify terrorists because terrorists don't talk to each other on Facebook and say, hey, let's go bomb something tomorrow. They use the dark web. So, terrorists, we could never check a terrorist with social media, but we could use social media to verify a legitimate relationship because, if you're in a legitimate relationship and you're not with each other now, your fiancé is overseas, you're going to talk to each other every day on social media and stuff. That's one of the modes you have of communicating. And that could verify that you're a legitimate couple, but he doesn't want to find that out because he has to deny some people. So he lied to the Senate Committee on Immigration. Any terrorist could enter the country easily on a fiancé visa and they can't do anything about it. That's the truth. If you don't say the truth, you're lying. So he also has a complete disregard for the science, for both sciences we've looked at so for statistics and psychology, and for the scientific method, which is going to be in the next section. So that's the end of this topic, and that's the end of part 1 of this video. Again, make sure you watch the entire C-SPAN video from beginning to end. We've watched it a bunch of times. Don't believe us. Watch for yourself and see what's going on. Appreciate your time. Go to video number 2 now.